What happens when a beloved acting legend sits down for what should be a simple morning chat, only to face the most hostile interview of his career? In just 24 seconds, one careless comment from the host would turn a routine promotional appearance into television chaos that no one saw coming. Michael Caine walked into that studio with nothing but respect and professionalism. He had been doing interviews for decades, promoting films, sharing stories, charming audiences across the globe. This was supposed to be easy. A quick chat with Lorraine Kelly on her morning show, talk about his latest project, maybe share a funny anecdote or two, and be out the door in time for lunch. But from the very first moment he settled into that bright orange chair, something felt different. The energy was off. Lorraine Kelly, usually bubbly and warm with her guests, seemed distracted, almost dismissive. She barely looked at him as he got comfortable, shuffling through her notes with an air of impatience. "Right then, Michael," she began, not bothering with pleasantries or even a proper welcome. "Let's get straight to it, shall we?" Michael raised an eyebrow but smiled politely. "Of course, Lorraine. Happy to be here. Are you, though?" she shot back, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Because honestly, looking at your recent film choices, I have to wonder if you're just phoning it in these days." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operator seemed to freeze. Michael Caine, a man who had worked with the greatest directors in cinema history, who had won Academy Awards and earned the respect of his peers, was being attacked before he could even get a word in. "I beg your pardon?" Michael said, his voice calm but with a hint of steel underneath. "Oh, come on," Lorraine continued, leaning back in her chair like she owned the place. "We all know you'll take any role that pays well these days. Batman. Those awful disaster movies. Where's the Michael Caine who gave us Alfie and The Italian Job?" Michael's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. Years of dealing with difficult directors and demanding producers had taught him patience. "Well, Lorraine, I've been fortunate enough to work consistently for over 50 years. Not every role can be Shakespeare, but I put the same effort into everything I do." "Do you, though?" she pressed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Because watching you in that last film, it looked like you were reading your lines off cue cards." The few audience members who had been brought in for the taping began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what they had come to see. They wanted the charming Michael Caine they knew from countless talk show appearances, not this ambush. "I think you might be mistaken there," Michael replied, his politeness becoming more forced by the second. "I've never used cue cards in my life. I learned my lines like any professional actor." "Right," Lorraine said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Look, let's talk about something else then. Your personal life. All those marriages. Bit of a pattern there, isn't it?" Michael's eyes narrowed. His personal relationships were not something he discussed lightly, especially not his failed marriage from decades ago. "I don't think that's really relevant to why I'm here today." "Everything's relevant when you're a public figure," Lorraine shot back. "The public has a right to know about the people they're watching on screen. Don't you think your history with women affects how we see you in romantic roles?" "My history with women?" Michael repeated, his voice growing colder. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but I don't appreciate the insinuation." Lorraine leaned forward, sensing she had struck a nerve. "I'm not insinuating anything. I'm asking directly. Do you think your reputation with the ladies helps or hurts your career?" "My reputation?" Michael stood up slightly in his chair, his famous composure finally beginning to crack. "What exactly do you think my reputation is?" "Oh, don't play innocent," Lorraine said with a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Everyone knows about the stories, the affairs, the drinking, the parties. You were quite the ladies' man back in the day, weren't you?" Michael Caine had been in this business long enough to know when an interview was going off the rails, but he had never experienced anything quite like this. The questions weren't just inappropriate, they were based on tabloid gossip and half-truths that had followed him around for years, despite being largely fabricated. "I think you've been reading too many gossip magazines," he said, trying to inject some lightness into his voice. "Most of those stories are complete rubbish, as I'm sure you know." "Are they, though?" Lorraine persisted. "Because I've done my research, Michael. I've talked to people. I know things." "What people? What things?" Michael asked, his patience wearing thinner by the second. "Well, for instance," Lorraine said, pulling out what looked like a printed email, "I have it on good authority that you were quite difficult to work with on your last 3 films. Directors complaining about your attitude, co-stars saying you were unprofessional." Michael stared at her in disbelief. "That's absolutely untrue. I've never had complaints about my professionalism. In fact, most directors I work with invite me back." "Do they, though?" Lorraine challenged. "Because looking at your recent filmography, It seems like you're working with a lot of first-time directors and smaller production companies. Not exactly a list material anymore, is it? The insults were coming faster now, each one more pointed than the last. Michael could feel his blood pressure rising, but he was determined not to give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose his temper completely. "I choose my projects based on the script and the people involved," he said through gritted teeth. "Not every film has to be a big-budget blockbuster to be worthwhile." "Right, of course," Lorraine said sarcastically. "It has nothing to do with the fact that the bigger directors don't want to work with someone who's past his prime." That was the moment. The moment when 70 years of grace and professionalism hung in the balance. Michael Caine sat there, staring at this woman who had invited him onto her show only to tear him down in front of millions of viewers. And something inside him finally snapped. "Past my prime?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Past my prime? Let me tell you something about being past my prime, love." The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Michael Caine leaned forward in his chair, his famous blue eyes blazing with an intensity that had captivated audiences for decades. But this wasn't acting. This was raw, unfiltered emotion from a man who had been pushed too far. "I've been in this business since before you were born," he continued, his voice steady but filled with controlled fury. "I've worked with Laurence Olivier, John Huston, Christopher Nolan. I've been nominated for 6 Academy Awards and won 2. I've entertained millions of people around the world for over 50 years. And you have the audacity to sit there and tell me I'm past my prime?" Lorraine Kelly shifted uncomfortably in her seat, perhaps realizing for the first time that she had awakened something she couldn't control. But instead of backing down, she doubled down on her attacks. "Awards don't mean anything if your recent work is subpar," she replied, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "The Academy has made plenty of mistakes over the years." "Mistakes?" Michael's eyebrows shot up. "Are you calling my entire career a mistake?" "I'm calling your recent career choices questionable at best," Lorraine fired back. "When was the last time you were in a film that actually mattered? That people talked about? That wasn't just a paycheck roll?" Michael sat back in his chair, studying her face with the intensity of a predator, sizing up its prey. "You want to know about films that matter? About roles that aren't just paychecks? Let me educate you about something, darling. Every role I take, I give my absolute best. Whether it's a $200 million blockbuster or a $5 million independent film. That's what professionals do. Professionals also know when to retire gracefully." Lorraine shot back without missing a beat. "They don't cling to careers that are clearly over." The audience gasped audibly. Even the cameraman looked shocked. This had gone far beyond inappropriate interview questions. This was character assassination happening live on television. Michael Caine stood up slowly from his chair, his full height imposing even at his age. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but unmistakably threatening, not physically, but in the way that only a man with true presence could manage. "My career is over?" he asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "My career is over? Let me tell you what's over, love. This interview is over." "Oh, sit down, Michael," Lorraine said, with a dismissive wave, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're being dramatic. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle a few tough questions anymore." "Tough questions?" Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call personal attacks and fabricated stories tough questions? You call insulting a guest on your own show journalism?" "I call it holding people accountable," Lorraine replied, her voice getting shriller as she sensed she was losing the battle. "Celebrities think they can just come on shows and get softball questions all the time. Well, not on my show." "Accountable for what exactly?" Michael demanded. "For having a successful career? For still working at my age? For not retiring when you think I should have? Accountable for taking roles you clearly don't care about just to pay the bills," Lorraine snapped. "For phoning in performances that insult your legacy." Michael stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of controlled rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely devastating. "You know what, Lorraine? I've met a lot of people in this business. Directors, producers, actors, writers, good ones and bad ones, professional ones and unprofessional ones. But I've never, in all my years, met someone quite like you." "And what's that supposed to mean?" she asked, though she was clearly beginning to regret pushing him this far. "It means," Michael said, moving closer to her desk, "that you're so desperate to make a name for yourself, to create some sort of controversy, that you'd rather destroy someone than build them up. You'd rather tear down a guest than actually do your job. My job is to ask the questions viewers want answered." Lorraine protested weakly. Your job, Michael countered, is to entertain and inform your audience, not to ambush people who were kind enough to appear on your show, not to spread lies and gossip as if they were facts. The studio had gone completely silent, except for the low hum of the cameras, which were still rolling. The producers in the control room were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but the train wreck was too compelling to stop. "I don't spread lies," Lorraine said defensively. "Everything I've said today is based on research." "Research?" Michael's voice rose for the first time. "What research? Tabloid headlines? Internet rumors? Gossip from people who've never even met me?" "I have sources," she insisted. "Sources?" Michael laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "Let me guess. Anonymous sources? People who wouldn't put their names to their claims? The same kind of sources that say Elvis is still alive and the moon landing was faked." Lorraine's face was beginning to flush red, either from embarrassment or anger. "You're being ridiculous." "I'm being ridiculous?" Michael asked incredulously. "I'm not the one who invited a guest onto my show just to insult them for 20 minutes. I'm not the one making up stories about affairs and drinking problems that never existed." "They're not made up," Lorraine protested, but her voice lacked conviction now. "Then prove it," Michael challenged, spreading his arms wide. "Go on. Show me this evidence you have. Show me these sources. Put up or shut up, as they say." Lorraine fumbled with the papers on her desk, clearly scrambling for something, anything, to back up her claims. But there was nothing there except printed internet articles and tabloid clippings that wouldn't hold up to any real scrutiny. "I don't have to prove anything to you," she finally said, trying to sound authoritative, but coming across as petulant instead. "No, you don't," Michael agreed. "But you do have to prove it to your viewers, to the people who trusted you to conduct a professional interview, to the network that employs you, to everyone watching at home who expected better." The words hit like hammer blows, each one perfectly aimed and devastatingly effective. Michael Caine hadn't just defended himself, he had completely dismantled her credibility in front of everyone. "You think you're so clever," Lorraine said, her composure finally cracking completely. "Coming in here with your fancy accent and your movie star attitude, thinking you're better than everyone else." "I don't think I'm better than everyone else," Michael replied calmly. "But I do think I'm better than this. And frankly, your viewers deserve better than this too." He began unhooking his microphone with deliberate, measured movements, each action a clear signal that he was done with this charade. "Where do you think you're going?" Lorraine demanded, panic creeping into her voice as she realized her big interview was falling apart spectacularly. "I'm leaving," Michael said simply, standing up and straightening his jacket. "I came here to promote my work and have a pleasant conversation. Instead, I found myself being ambushed by someone more interested in creating drama than doing journalism." "You can't just leave in the middle of an interview," Lorraine protested. Michael paused at the edge of the set and turned back to look at her one final time. His expression was a mixture of disappointment, disgust, and something that might have been pity. "Watch me," he said. And with those two words, Michael Caine began walking toward the exit, his microphone pack dangling from his hand like a discarded weapon. The cameras followed his every step as he moved with the dignity and poise that had made him a legend. But Lorraine Kelly wasn't finished. In what would become the most catastrophic decision of her broadcasting career, she decided to keep talking. "Oh, that's right, just walk away," she called after him, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. "That's what you always do, isn't it? When things get difficult, when someone calls you out, you just disappear." Michael stopped dead in his tracks, his shoulders tensed. For a moment, everyone in the studio held their breath, wondering if he would simply continue walking, or if he would turn around one last time. He turned around. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice carrying across the studio with perfect clarity despite the distance between them. "You heard me," Lorraine said, emboldened by what she mistook for hesitation. "This is exactly what people say about you. When the going gets tough, Michael Caine gets going, right out the door." "People say that about me?" Michael asked, walking slowly back toward the set. "What people? The same imaginary sources you've been quoting all morning?" "Real people," Lorraine insisted, though she was clearly making it up as she went along. "People in the industry. People who've worked with you." Michael reached the edge of the set again and placed his hands on the back of his chair. "Name one." "What?" "Name one person who has said that about me. One director, one producer, one co-star, anyone. Give me a name." Lorraine's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had painted herself into a corner with her lies and now had nowhere to go. "I can't reveal my sources," she finally stammered, "because they don't exist," Michael said flatly. just like everything else you've said today. You've built this entire interview on fabrications and gossip." "That's not true," Lorraine protested weakly. "Then explain something to me," Michael said, leaning on the chair. "If I'm so difficult to work with, if I'm such a problem on sets, if directors don't want to work with me, then how do you explain this?" He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, like a gunslinger drawing his weapon. "Christopher Nolan called me yesterday," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent studio. "Personal call. Not through agents, not through managers. He called me directly to discuss our next project together. Our fourth collaboration, by the way." Lorraine's face went pale. "Steven Spielberg sent me a birthday card last month." Michael continued relentlessly. "Handwritten, personal note about how much he enjoyed working with me and hopes we can do it again soon." "Anyone can claim anything," Lorraine said desperately. "You're right," Michael agreed. "Anyone can claim anything, which is exactly what you've been doing all morning. But unlike you, I can prove what I'm saying." He held up his phone. "Would you like me to call Christopher right now? Put him on speaker? Let him tell your viewers what he really thinks about working with me?" The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the studio knew that if Michael Caine was willing to make that call on live television, he was telling the truth. "That won't be necessary," Lorraine said quickly. "No, I think it will be," Michael replied, already scrolling through his contacts. "Because you see, this isn't just about me anymore. This is about integrity. This is about truth. This is about what happens when someone decides they can say whatever they want about another person just because they have a microphone." "Michael, please," Lorraine said, and for the first time all morning, she sounded genuinely frightened. "Please what?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "Please let you continue to spread lies about me? Please pretend this never happened? Please protect you from the consequences of your own actions?" "I was just doing my job," she whispered. Michael looked up from his phone and stared directly into her eyes. "No, Lorraine, you were doing the opposite of your job. Your job is to inform and entertain your viewers. Your job is to treat your guests with respect. Your job is to conduct professional interviews that people want to watch." He gestured around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the crew, the uncomfortable audience members, the cameras that were still rolling. "Does this look professional to you? Does this look like something people want to watch? Does this look like good television?" Lorraine couldn't answer. She sat frozen in her chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. "You know what the tragedy is here?" Michael continued, his voice softer now but no less powerful. "I actually came here excited to be on your show. I've watched you over the years, and I thought you were good at what you do. I thought you were someone who cared about her craft, who respected her guests, who understood that television is supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart." "I do care," Lorraine said weakly. "Do you?" Michael asked. "Because caring means preparation, real preparation, not gossip and rumors. Caring means asking questions that serve your audience, not questions that serve your ego. Caring means treating your guests like human beings, not like targets in some twisted game." He put his phone away and picked up his microphone pack again. "You had a chance today to have a real conversation with someone who's been in this business for over 50 years. You could have asked about my experiences working with legends, about the changes I've seen in filmmaking, about the advice I'd give to young actors. You could have given your viewers something valuable, something meaningful." "I can still do that," Lorraine said desperately. "We can start over, forget everything that happened and begin again." Michael shook his head slowly. "No, we can't. Because this wasn't a mistake, Lorraine. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. You chose to attack me instead of interview me. You chose to spread lies instead of seek truth. You chose to create conflict instead of connection." He began walking toward the exit again, but this time, his pace was measured, final. "And the saddest part is," he said without turning around, "you're actually quite good on television when you're being yourself. You have a natural warmth, a genuine curiosity, a way of making people feel comfortable. You could have been great at this job." "Could have been," Lorraine called after him, the past tense hitting her like a physical blow. Michael paused at the studio door and looked back one final time. His expression was no longer angry or frustrated. It was simply disappointed. "Could have been," he confirmed. "But greatness requires integrity, Lorraine, and integrity is something you can't fake." The studio door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like thunder in the absolute silence that followed. Lorraine Kelly sat alone at her desk, surrounded by her crew, her audience, and her cameras, but utterly and completely isolated by her own choices. The red light on camera 1 was still glowing, still recording, still broadcasting her humiliation to viewers across the country. She looked directly into the lens, her mouth opening as if to speak, to explain, to salvage something from the wreckage of what should have been a routine morning interview. But no words came. For the first time in her television career, Lorraine Kelly had absolutely nothing to say.